Welcome everyone to our live discussion on Let's Talk Risk. I'm Naveen Agarwal and I'm so excited to welcome Nidhi Gani today. Now, Nidhi has deep subject matter expertise in the area of cybersecurity, especially for medical devices. So, Nidhi, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
And thank you for inviting me again. This is my second time on the show. So, absolutely thrilled to be here sharing whatever I know about and with your wonderful audience as well. Thank
Great.
you.
So, Nidhi, you have deep expertise in this area. You work as a cybersecurity consultant for a leading consulting agency. You're a professor and a fellow at Northwestern University. I'm curious to actually ask Northeastern or
Yes.
Northwestern. Northeastern.
Eastern. I
Okay,
wish it was
okay, okay.
Northwestern.
All right, so that's Boston.
Yeah.
That's
Cambridge.
Boston. Okay, I got you. So we don't have to establish your credentials anymore. I'm very curious to hear your personal story. How did you get interested in cybersecurity in the first place?
Actually, by chance, I would say. I'm a person who was never interested in technology as such, and that's why I chose to study biotechnology. And I mean, although that's tech, but more like software tech. But then, as the industry started to move, I took a plunge into working at a digital health startup at Harvard Innovations Lab, and that was my first entry into digital health. Back then, I wasn't able to wrap my head around what is software, what is sensor. I mean, I know these terms, but how do they function was a little difficult. But anyway, I think once I was interviewing for a company, and one of the VPs I interviewed with, we had a very good conversation, and I told her that I can do any projects. I'm good at figuring things out. So that's when she went ahead and opened an entire new requisition for me saying, why don't you do data privacy and data security, cyber security for the company? And this was in 2021, where cybersecurity was not yet a law in FDA. So I had that entire year to just literally figure out from scratch. There was no one doing it, at least at that point in that firm. And I had the opportunity to like dig deep and learn it from scratch. And then I even took a certification from Harvard, which was okay, but it just built my credibility. And then from there on, I think I've just been in the industry for 5 years with cyber, and more doors have opened, and that has deepened my expertise now.
Oh, that is a fascinating story. Being at the right place at the right time, showing the
Yeah.
interest, showing the commitment, and having people to open the doors for you, right?
Yeah.
How amazing
Yeah.
is that? And I hope people feel inspired by your story to pursue the dreams that they have and not give up just because the job description doesn't say what they want to do, right? That's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, because every conversation has an opportunity, right? Like just go in and you don't know what's gonna come out of it. So
Correct.
yeah.
Correct.
Wow.
That's awesome. So Nidhi, I'm going to start our conversation by asking you to tell us a little bit about this Silk Typhoon incident. I'm curious. Looks like it's a big deal. Microsoft came out with a big assessment and analysis on March 5th, and I know Health Isaac, which is also one of our information sharing agencies in the healthcare space, also issued like a warning. So just bring us up to speed with what Silk Typhoon is and why we should care about that in health. The interesting part about cybersecurity is it is so vast and there are so many different facets to it, like cyber warfare, cyber espionage, and ransomwares, and it's so vast from an infrastructure standpoint. And that's what that and Silk Typhoon fits in the cyber espionage area, and they're well known for attacking the cloud specifically. It's very interesting how like every criminal has their niche. So Silk Typhoon also has a niche of moving laterally, building attacks laterally through the cloud systems. And so that is what is also interesting. And how that impacts healthcare is mainly in the active directories, right? So when I immediately read it, I was like, okay, what does that mean? But I could make a connection because when I've been working with startups, especially like software as medical devices, what we see is the startups generally have their cybersecurity controls established in a way where they depend on the hospital's active directory to give them or authorize access when a user wants to enter into an application. And now if these active directories are going to be affected, then your
typically like going to get into unauthorized space, and then directly then it also impacts patient safety at that point. So that's where I think the problem starts to come into picture from a patient safety standpoint, and also from a cloud standpoint. So many medical devices today are on the cloud, their servers are, all their data is flowing from the cloud stored there. So that's why when such organized criminals come into picture, it's very interesting to see how are you going to protect yourself, and paying close attention to zero-day vulnerabilities is also important. The day that there are vulnerabilities, being able to like actively patch them. There's a saying in the cyber industry where you're looking at patching Tuesday and vulnerable Wednesday. So immediately, there are vulnerabilities. So being able to catch those zero-day vulnerabilities is also important. So Silk Typhoon pretty much specializes in identifying those zero-day vulnerabilities and exploiting them. So that's the context, yeah.
If I understand correctly, these are not just criminals on the street. These are not solo operators. These are sort of country agents. So like I heard it's backed by China and state-sponsored cyber attacks. Did I read it correctly, or am I kind of falling for some fake news?
No, I mean, in cybersecurity, you're also considering a lot of context, right? Like who the attackers are. It could be a very random attacker from the street. It could be a nation state actor. And Silk Typhoon is a nation state actor because earlier wars were fought on land, air, water, but today we are fighting on the internet. So there are like mass campaigns that China also runs actually to somehow penetrate into especially US systems and gain potential like patient data or even just data in general. So Typhoon is one of those cyber espionage companies which runs mass campaigns into extracting data also and exploiting zero-day vulnerabilities. It's very interesting, not just from a Silk Typhoon standpoint, but just the entire concept of cyber espionage is very, very interesting because these are organized criminals. So they run campaigns. In fact, the most famous jet of US, which is the FS-16, those blueprints were also extracted from cyber espionage companies, and China immediately replicated them also just by stealing that design. So these campaigns are run like, yeah, China like runs campaigns.
I bet. And we have heard about state-sponsored cyber actions, and I'm sure every country is developing these sort of weapons, cyber weapons. Now, as far as I understand, no actual attack has actually happened through Silk Typhoon in the healthcare system. Is that correct? So far, it's just a vulnerability and a possibility of a potential attack. Is that right so far?
I think so, yes, because we have not seen any update from CISA or even FDA saying that any vulnerability directly in the healthcare system has occurred. But because the healthcare systems depend on Microsoft and other cloud systems, they can have a downstream impact.
Sure, sure. So the potential exists, and we have to be careful about how to, fixing that issue. So I want to talk about some actual cyber attacks that have happened, just to put context behind this for our audience. And you had shared with me a couple of examples already before we went live, but can you talk about some of those like sort of high profile and concerning actual cyber incidents that have happened in the medical device space?
So there has not been a direct impact on safety, as in like patients dying. But thankfully, we've found those vulnerabilities, and there is always that potential. That's why earlier it was thought as hypothetical, but today it's no more hypothetical because there is that potential. Like Medtronic insulin pumps were part of it, even BD infusion pumps were there as well. So there have been vulnerabilities that have been found, which, when exploited, can lead to potential patient safety impact. So that's where I think vulnerability management plan and monitoring these vulnerabilities have to come into picture, especially with like insulin pumps. Anyone that were closer to adjacent network, a local had like local access could get potentially into the system, insulin system, and potentially also change the insulin delivery settings, which can lead to like hyperglycemia, hypoglycemia. So these are, and yeah, that's why I think these vulnerabilities have to be caught early on, and therefore also have plans to mitigate these, right? Because yeah, otherwise there are like repercussions here. Even with like DICOM images, PACS images, which is more of a radiology system, these are placed in clinical environments, hospital networks, and once they're placed there, because of the vast interconnectedness that we live in today, the systems are very complex. So once there's a malware that enters, it can spread across the entire network and impact a lot of devices, and not just from patient safety, not just from patient data standpoint, but also availability of the device itself. That's a major concern.
Yeah. And your example of the insulin pump hits home to me on a personal level. And I'm not a diabetic person, but I'm at a point where it's kind of borderline. And I don't know if you saw my post on LinkedIn, but I actually got myself a CGM. This is
Yeah.
actually a over-the-counter product, and I'm monitoring my glucose levels, and it's amazing technology. So the reason I mention this is because it can hit each one of us on a personal level. And now, if we interact with a cell phone app, it is very easy for somebody to kind of fudge that information and make us believe that the number we are seeing on the screen is actually different from the real number the sensor is measuring. So
Yeah.
we might take different actions, which is not appropriate. Now, Nidhi, I'm gonna share with you like way back when, I think late 2000s, or I don't know when, but there used to be a show called Homeland on Showtime. And in fact, at that time, they kind of foresaw this scenario. It was, of course, dramatized in the episode in which the vice president, who has a pacemaker, was hacked into by
Yeah.
these like bad actors. And
Yeah.
some strange things happened on the screen. And as a follow up, actually, I read in the news that Dick Cheney, who was the VP at that time, had some of the settings turned off in his pacemaker because of national security concerns. So, the point of this is that these are not hypothetical risks. These are real risks that can impact individual patients, but also not just one or two people, but people at a massive scale who are relying on these patient monitors in a hospital environment or insulin pumps in a very large way. If so, this could be crazy. Like we are living in a new world, aren't we? With everything moving to cloud and everything getting faster, technology is great, but we are living in a new world, right? Can you share some of the real world concerns that all of us should have? Not only as individuals, but also as organizations and risk practitioners. What should we be thinking about? Yeah, the example of Dick Cheney at that point is very interesting because, see, at that point, the VP was just an important person, right? So they're supposed to be like very stealth and careful about what they're doing. But today, that is no more the case. It's not about whether you as a person are important to the country or not, because there are these multi patient harms, which means that if there is a bug in the or if there is a vulnerability in the firmware, just like it happened with patient monitors of contact, so at that point, you were seeing on your user interface, you were probably seeing like wrong patient vitals as well, which have like repercussions for normal people like us also. And with insulin, like you said, just that vulnerable firmware can affect multiple devices and multiple people. And so then if you think about it, if you want to ruin a company's reputation or put them out of business, this is a potential way to do it also, and which can also then lead to mass patient safety issues, which can then also put stress on the healthcare system and increasing the healthcare burden and all of that. So it's a direct national security issue that we are talking about if you like start to scale it up. So that itself, it's scary, exciting, fascinating, everything at the same time, because it's a simulation that you're literally a simulation that you're like living in, I think. Yeah. So now let's talk about how are we trying to manage this? Like we know there are frameworks now for cybersecurity risk management in medical devices. Can you just give us a 30,000-foot level view of what these frameworks are? First of all, FDA has done an amazing job in putting that guidance together, which where we are talking about the secure product development framework, which pretty much takes into consideration pre-market and post-market considerations for cybersecurity, where you're attacking from various areas, right from supply chain as bomb standpoint to designing secure by design medical devices using design controls, and also from a risk management standpoint, because today you're not just solving for safety, but you're also solving for security and security related safety risks. That's also very important. So these ones you're looking at from a pre-market standpoint, also like all the software anomalies that are remnant during your design, assessing for security risk assessment for those anomalies is also important. Then, from your post market standpoint, you're looking at vulnerability management periodically, because a lot of vulnerabilities will keep coming in, especially as larger organizations and class 3
medical devices because you're using so much commercial software and OTS software. So you have to constantly scour for those vulnerabilities, patch them, all of that. So that's where the secure product development framework comes into picture, being able to mitigate the security risks from multiple areas. That's important.
Yeah. So this secure product development framework doesn't sound that complex to me. Sounds common sense.
Yeah.
Do you feel like companies have resources in place, practices in place to be actually able to practice this, or are they going to encounter some challenges in the near term?
Earlier companies did not have this at all, but FDA is again, like FDA is rejecting submissions. FDA is also giving a lot of deficiencies out for cybersecurity, which is really good because then the companies will start to take it seriously. We're also seeing a lot of companies come to us saying that we need cyber stuff, cyber documentation to be done, because they know that now without that you cannot do a submission. So that's a good push, I would say. And yeah, and the reviews are also getting stricter by the day, which is good to see, because otherwise just getting by is not going to work. So that's also good. And yeah, I think that's where we're seeing where things are heading.
Although I feel like, we might be taking a one step backwards now with so much of chaos at the FDA. I don't know to what extent they will be able to maintain that level of rigor in pre-market submissions for cybersecurity. It just seems like a very chaotic time. In this context, how do you think we should approach this problem? Because at the end of the day, whatever FDA does or doesn't do, as manufacturers, I think we are responsible. We are responsible for our brands, for our market, for our patients, and it should be in our own interest. So how should we be looking at this? Does it require a different mindset is what I'm asking you, because we have been relying on FDA so much that once they put the stamp of approval, we feel secure.
Yeah.
But I don't think we can take that anymore. FDA cannot be that source of assurance or guarantee to us, right? Would you agree with that?
Yes and no, because I mean, the remaining staff at least is always going to look at security as one of the most important factors in an approval and clearance. But having said that, it's not just about, like you said, FDA putting in that stamp. I think it's also companies as medical device manufacturers, their responsibility to ensure that you're providing safe, effective, and secure medical devices. So I think the onus of burden should not be on FDA or on the consumers. It's supposed to be on the medical device manufacturers. It'll also just help from a branding standpoint, because nobody would want to wear a vulnerable device. Tomorrow, the Livonova that you're wearing, you encounter challenges, you're immediately going to switch your brand. And
Yeah, Dexcom
yeah,
is
so
there. I'm thinking about trying Dexcom next. They also make a
yeah,
meter like that. You're so right. So what I'm hearing you say is that the market competition, consumer awareness, patient advocacy, these are factors that will drive the right kind of behavior, not necessarily regulatory compliance, is what I'm hearing you say.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, as consumers, we should demand for secure medical devices, because ultimately it's our data, it's our safety, and compliance compliance will come into picture, but ultimately the companies are going to pay fines. That's the end of it. And maybe some companies will lose business if they've not put their procedures and policies in place. But it's your life at stake here. I think as consumers, we should demand for secure medical devices, ask for best practices that have been followed. Are they present on the website? Read the user manual, because cyber labeling is part and is a requirement of the IFU. So look at that as well. And if you find any vulnerabilities, proactively report those, so that it's a shared responsibility, I think, among everyone. I think you make a great point. It's a shared responsibility, like everything else, and we can, as individuals, as patients, as consumers, as professionals, I think we can play a big role to help spread the awareness first. And I think that's the reason why we are having a conversation like this, which is not a technical conversation. It's not a webinar. It's not a lecture. It's just having conversation for awareness and bringing people together. So, Nidhi, I want to focus a little bit more on the post-market side, because I know we focus so much on pre-market. Everybody wants to do that. Like that's the most glamorous thing, innovation after innovation and go to market. But what I'm thinking about this is that post-market phase for monitoring and taking action against cyber vulnerabilities is actually even more important than pre-market, because we don't know. We don't know where the next attack will come from. We don't know what kind, right? Is that right? Yeah, because cybersecurity is ever evolving. It's not today, it's different, tomorrow it's going to be different, because even when you're looking at vulnerabilities, you're always looking from a timestamp standpoint, like this date, this time, this the vulnerability did not exist, but it could exist the very next second also. So it is ever evolving, and that's why from a post market standpoint it becomes even more critical, because that's when vulnerabilities are exploited, and vulnerabilities are they arise, and at that point you are either taking a proactive approach, or you can also partner with security researchers. They can help you out, ethical hackers can help you out, or you will be held at ransom. That's also the other way to find out, and it's a whole separate ball game to think about, should you pay that ransom or not, because that's another story.
Yeah. But post market surveillance is where I focused a lot in my practice. And I know, as is, without cybersecurity concerns, as is, post market tends to be very challenging for medical device companies. We are so used to checking the box and treating this as a regulatory exercise. I think it might take a change in mindset. Like, your product development is never done. In this environment, your product development is never done. There is no post market in the sense that there's no before and after. It's a continuum. So the life cycle risk management takes on a new meaning, new purpose in this context. So how do you think we can help change this approach and mindset? It sounds kind of, in some ways, quite overwhelming to me.
Yeah, see, with respect to post market, you are pretty much waiting for the consumers or the physicians to tell you what the complaint is about. So it's a more reactive
More
approach.
reactive. Yeah.
But with cybersecurity, you got to be more proactive, because you already want to establish plans in place to say that this is how I'm going to look for vulnerabilities. So the companies are now taking an active role, looking at vulnerabilities themselves, working with different communities and so on. Because now it's not about adverse events; it's about not letting those adverse events happen in the very first.
Removing the
So the
vulnerability.
defense system comes into picture.
Yeah.
More than you're building that defense, or maybe even playing offense at some point, right? With this plans.
So, Nidhi, I know this question might sound like a cliche because everyone asks this. I have a feeling that hackers are going to get smarter over time. They're going to get better. You have already talked about the zero-day vulnerabilities. I'm sure people are going to exploit it. And in the wild imagination that I have, and maybe not so wild, probably they're going to deploy AI to do it. Not even human hackers. It will be AI hackers. Does that sound like a fanciful idea to you, or it might happen?
It's already happening. Like AI is being used in cyber attacks, because one of the attacks that recently happened, it could be the Silk Typhoon itself, where these are automated bots that are distributed to and run campaigns to collect data through phishing and all of that. So gone are those days where things were done manually, but AI is already being deployed as part of cybersecurity. But now it's also important to see how can AI itself be used to protect those systems, because we already have those systems also in place where you're automatically scouring the internet for vulnerabilities, and you're automatically patching them also. So those automated tools are already here. But now it's a matter of how will the technology of AI itself evolve with large language models and those coming into picture, and the technology itself maturing every day. So that'll be very interesting to see how does the offense and the defense at the same time are playing, you know, mouse and cat. So that would be interesting.
Yeah. It always happens because there are so many incentives to exploit any vulnerability, whether it's artificial or it's natural. I think that's kind of human nature. There's an industry around it. So I fully expect that the hackers and the nation sponsored cyber projects to get even more sophisticated. I fully expect that. I think the bottom line here is that we got to be vigilant. We cannot let go. And I'm no fan of Dick Cheney, okay? So don't misunderstand me. But I still remember things that he said. There are things that we know, and there are things that we don't know, but there are things that we don't know that we don't know. And the future is evolving in front of us so fast. It's kind of breathtaking. It's amazing. You're right. It's exciting. It's concerning. It's liberating. So, Nidhi, I want to thank you for your time. I know we are coming close to our 30 minutes. And I want to invite you just by, I know it went fast. It's fun, right? When we are having fun conversations, it's always great. Can you share with us just maybe two or three key top level points that we, like regular people, should think about for cybersecurity?
Yeah, very first think is, I mean, that conundrum between how much digital footprint you want to have, because the more you have, the more you're exposed, but the less you have, the less relevant you feel in society. So I guess that conundrum is always there. So you gotta like figure out how you want to tread there. And that's just from a general standpoint. But from a regulatory affairs, cybersecurity standpoint, I think it's important to design your devices secure by design and demand for secure by design devices. That is something that I want to say. And if you are a founder, it's important for you to, you can also like brand yourself as a cyber first company, which can be very interesting in your branding proposition, and maybe like raise capital based on that as well, because you're seeing so many different attacks that are happening. There are, I think, more than 160 vulnerabilities that are open today in at least they were like today or last year, where insulin pumps and all these devices have vulnerabilities open there. So be proactive, patch, and just build that culture from day one, I think. And I've been saying this where I say that cybersecurity is a culture and not a couture, right? Like, don't bolt it in, but bake and build the security within that framework. Awesome, Nidhi. Thank you so much. I so much enjoyed this conversation. I want to thank you for your time. And I'm not going to put you on the spot, but yeah, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, guys. Nidhi is on Substack. So follow her at Nidhi Gani. She's gonna start producing some fantastic content, fabulous content very soon on Substack. She is the real deal. So I can't recommend it enough. And I hope to see your good stuff coming out on Substack very soon, Nidhi. I want now to wish that you all said it, I have to oblige. I had this seed in my mind that I wanted to kind of plug that to you. There is nothing that beats public accountability. Okay, yeah. So I do that all the time for myself. If I had to make a tough goal, I publicly announce it and I let people kind of, in a gentle way, hold me accountable. The reason I'm doing this to you is, first of all, you're such a brilliant person and you're such a hardworking, dedicated. Thank you. Those of you guys who don't know Nidhi, check out her LinkedIn profile. She's involved in a lot of other projects, including volunteer projects, including nonprofits. Your energy amazes me. Okay, you are one of those brilliant, driven people, and we want to hear more from you. We don't want you to, and I know you're busy. I know you're busy. So Nidhi, I wish. No, I want to write and I want to write. So thank you for that, Nancy. Yeah. I hope we see some good stuff coming out from you very soon, guys. It has been a pleasure having you today. We are just starting out with Substack Live, and we'll be doing more of these sessions in the future. So reach out to me if you have ideas. If you want to come on the show, please reach out to me. Nidhi, final comments from you. I mean, feel free to ask questions if you have, and feel free to connect with me. Happy to help anyone who is trying to crack into the industry, but always happy to be on this platform. And yeah, a good community. Happy to contribute. Yes. Awesome, Nidhi. Thank you so much again. And guys, we will see you once again next time. Take care.